One. Okay. Hello, everybody, and thank you so much for joining me today. My name is Leah Martino, and I'm the programming manager for Black People Don't Tango Productions. Today, I have the pleasure of interviewing Marquice Williams, spoken word poet, educator, artist, and musician. Keese is the co-director of the Spitfire Poetry Group in Savannah, Georgia, organizes the Savannah Spoken Word Festival, and works at Park Place Outreach Youth Emergency Shelter. Keese is a 2018 Multicultural Chamber of Commerce 40 Under 40 honoree, a UGA Red Clay National Writing Project Fellow, and his group Spitfire was nominated Best of Savannah 2013. Today, I have a few questions about you and your relationship with the Georgia Poetry Society. So, firstly, how did you get involved with the Georgia Poetry Society? / how do you know? I call her Miss C. You might know her as Lucinda Clark or Miss Clark. Good.
Yeah, so that's actually how I was able to get involved with Georgia Poetry Society was through Miss Lucinda. I had always heard of the Georgia Poetry Society, but never was able to make those connections. And Miss Lucinda reached out to me, and we were able to have a long conversation. We were talking about the history of spoken word in Augusta, as well as the history of spoken word in Savannah and everything as well too. And we started to realize that our scenes were a lot more connected than what we expected. So from there, it's pretty much just been on the up. We've been kind of staying in communication with each other and keeping each other abreast to what's going on in our scenes and ways that both of our scenes can support each other.
Oh, that's so nice. I know you're doing a little program for the quarterly meeting, I think in late October. Can you tell us a little bit about that, or is that a secret?
Nah, it's not a secret. I'm really excited for this. I want to say it's at the Augusta Literary Center,
Mhm.
where I'll be doing a presentation. I'll be doing a actual performance of my spoken word. So if you would like to catch a live performance of my spoken word poetry, you can do that. But then I'll also be teaching a workshop as well too. So something I love doing is working with artists of all ages. So not just kids. I've had the opportunity to work all around Georgia with some amazing artists, literary artists, singer songwriters, so on and so on. But yeah, it's really just going to create a space to where everybody can get up and tell their story, as well as finding ways for all of us to connect, um, even though we might not really know each other.
Mhm.
When we start to tell our story, those are ways for us to really start to connect.
Well, yeah, that's really the power of poetry, and that's such a beautiful craft that you've mastered. And I know you're kind of talking about spoken word with Miss C. I have a question about that.
Okay.
Um, what do you believe the key differences between written poetry and spoken word are, and why did you gravitate towards spoken word?
Yeah. So I really believe that spoken word poetry, and even in the way that I run my workshops and different things like that, I combine a lot of theater with
Mhm.
spoken word poetry. Because spoken word poetry is literally bringing the words to life.
Mm.
You're breathing life into this paper, or into this performance, into this piece, into this story. So whereas you're reading it on text, yes, you breathe life into it via text, and it's written, and the person has to read it. But when they're reading it, they don't necessarily have those same just little things that we do, nuances that we do with our
Yeah.
voices,
Mhm.
the tone, and when we say things. So it's like, I might say that I'm happy in this, but I can say that I'm happy in a sad tone, and that adds a whole nother layer to the piece.
Mhm.
So with spoken word poetry, to me, I feel that you can get more into character, and you can be more playful with the piece, and be more creative with the piece, because you're literally, I tell a lot of the people that I work with, um, that your pieces are characters in themselves. Your pieces are alive. So when you get up on that stage, how would that piece dress? How would that piece stand? How would it talk? These pieces have personalities of themselves that are outside of even who we are. So when we get up there, we are like, I'm no longer Marquice when I get up on the stage. I am this piece.
Yeah.
So that's the biggest difference between spoken word poetry and then text poetry. Because text poetry, it gives it to the reader. Like it gives all that power to the reader. But then in spoken word poetry, the poet or the performer still has the power to paint this picture in the way that they intended it to be seen.
Mm, true. Yeah. Or like also like facial expressions. You can't get that
Yeah,
via a
exactly.
page. Yeah. Okay.
Because
That's
the
amazing.
body, like it, we communicate in so many different ways.
Mhm.
So through spoken word poetry, you're right. It's not just the words that are telling the story. It's the body language. It's the facial expressions. It's the tone of the voice, the way we move our hands, the way we scrunch up our face, like all of these things. Whether our voice gets high pitched right here, or
Yeah.
all of those things. So you really start to layer and break down what is communication and how can I tell this story in the most efficient way.
Truly. That's that's such a great explanation. And I think we kind of already like jumped into the nitty-gritty of it, but just before we get more into that, how did you start writing and how did it grow into like your passion slash profession?
Yeah. So I like to tell a lot of people that spoken word poetry, it found me.
Mm.
I wasn't necessarily looking for it or anything else like that. I kind of just stumbled into this culture. Um, so I most like artists, most artists. They say that something traumatic had to happen in our lives in order for us to really start telling our story or start expressing ourselves in creative ways. And unfortunately, that is the same for me, where something traumatic happened in my life, and my way of dealing with it was through writing.
Mhm.
Um, at the time, I didn't necessarily call it spoken word poetry. I was just writing. And then I met a man by the name of Clinton D. Powell, who was actually a theater director, playwright, and he was a spoken word artist as well too.
Oh,
So I sat in his class, and he began to like talk about different ways of expressing yourself and really just telling stories. And he got up there and he did, like, it was one of the very first spoken word pieces I had ever heard. And I was just like, hey, like it almost sounds like rap,
mhm.
but it's not quite rap. And it's almost like theater, but it's not quite theater.
Mhm.
It's like theater and rap coming together. So I started to experiment with it and really play with it. And from there, I just started to see that a lot of people would come up to me after my shows and say, hey, that one piece really touched me, or hey, like you should really keep doing this, and hey, this piece, I felt like you were telling my story, and like hearing things like that, that's when it really started to settle in and was just like, hey, like, I've been kind of doing this for fun, but people are really gravitating to what I'm saying, and what I'm saying seems to really be changing people's lives.
Mhm.
So why not take this serious? And I've been taking it serious ever since. And just all of these amazing doors have been opening for me. And I've been meeting so many amazing people as well too. So I like that's why I say, I tell everybody that this life literally chose me.
Yeah.
And if anything, I did everything in my power to try and go against it, and it was just like, no, here, you're really good at this thing. Take it, carry this. So yeah,
Well, if you know you have a passion, you have to do it. You can't just
yeah.
let go. Yeah. And then I was doing some research on you, obviously before the interview, and I know you're in Spitfire. And I saw Spitfire's mantra is if you must speak, always Spitfire. What does that mean to you?
So so Spitfire Poetry Group was started by two men, which is Clinton D. Powell and Ralph Renaissance Dillard.
Mhm.
And they are the ones who coined the "If You Must Speak" Spitfire.
Yeah.
And this is what like I was raised because I was in Spitfire poetry group since I was a younger kid.
Mhm.
When Spitfire was going into the schools and different things
Mhm.
like that. So to me, when they were saying, if you must spit, always spit fire. Like if you're going to tell your truth, always tell your whole truth
Yeah.
unapologetically.
Mhm.
Um, and sometimes in those moments, people are going to get burned.
Yeah.
People are going to be forced to look at themselves. They're going to be forced to face the fire.
Yeah.
And in today's society, we don't get a lot of that. Of holding accountability, being held accountable,
Mhm.
but also being able to take our story and find these powerful ways of just reimagining them. Because fire in as an element, it transforms.
Yeah.
So it's like, yes, it might turn something to ashes, but they do control burn downs of forests, so that way the forest can regrow. It's the same thing with our spirits. Sometimes we're going through so much in our lives that we need to do a control burn down of like everything that's in our life, so that way the things that really truly need to grow can grow. So that's like Spitfire is all of those things. Spitfire, the fire inside of you, it's the passion. So you're spitting your passions.
Mhm.
The fire is this element of transformation. So you're spitting hopes of transformation or showing how you transform. So your fire is that metaphor for your story and for who
Yeah.
you are. So if you're going to spit fire, or if you're going to speak, or if you're going to spit, always spit fire.
Yeah.
Spit your truth,
Yes.
wholeheartedly, honest.
Yeah.
And sorry if I be rambling too.
Oh,
Like
oh my gosh, that was the most beautiful metaphoric explanation ever. You were really going into like how ashes are like the most true, the most. I remember my sister did an art project about this. I'm trying to remember what ashes. It's the most pure element
yeah,
because whatever destruction came from it, it transformed it completely into something
exactly.
new. So yeah,
And
I
then
I
look,
love
now you can take. Sorry, but yeah, now you can take those ashes, and people use ashes to what they make makeup out of ashes, or
yeah.
they was it you can make cleaning like teeth whitening out of ashes and
Mhm.
charcoal and stuff like that, or even to what is it, to filter your water out. So it's like this, you're transforming, the fire transforms this thing, but then this thing is still so many things.
Yeah.
So it's not something that's finite, but it's infinite in the possibilities of what it could be. So that fire even is infinite in the possibilities of what it could be. So
Truly. Yeah. And then my last question, not to put you on the spot or anything, but could you share a stanza of one of your favorite poems you wrote, or maybe a favorite poem you just have, or anything like that?
sure. And I might go off camera just for a sec, only because I'm
Okay,
trying to
that's
pull up.
totally fine.
I have this piece that is it's called Love Language.
Mhm.
And it's a piece about my granddad. But then more than that, it's a piece because I love doing historical pieces. But
Mhm.
oftentimes we don't look at our own stories as being a part of history. So like being able to capture our family history because our grandparents aren't going to be here forever, and somebody's going to have to retell those stories.
Mhm.
Um, and we learn about ourselves in telling those stories as well too. So I wrote a poem about that as far as like things that I learned from my granddaddy and from my grandma. This is kind of towards the end of the piece. Um, sorry, I'm
Oh,
scrolling
don't worry
through.
about it. Don't worry about it.
So let's see. Trying to figure out the best part to do. I'm sorry.
Don't worry about it.
All right, so I'll just go ahead and read it. But and before I knew it, I had learned to speak a language that dares to dream and even walk if it has to, because sometimes you have to strap on your work boots and get things done for the ones you love. You have to get messy wearing your love as a fashion statement. I have learned to speak a language that is filled only after it has successfully filled vacancies and tummies rioting from a lack of nutrients. A language that will pop you on your head if you ain't patient while God is cooking up your blessings. A language that will feed you. A language that will clothe you. A language that will work for you. Um, so yeah, that's kind of.
Oh, I love that. That's so beautiful. Thank you so much for sharing.
So while I was looking for the piece, I ended up finding my first draft of the piece.
Oh.
So there were lines that I knew that I took out that were still in this piece, and I was just like, "Whoa, okay, what am I looking at?" So that's why I was taking.
Don't worry, everything is part of the process.
Yes.
Okay, well, thank you so much for speaking with me today. And everybody should look out for the Georgia Poetry Society quarterly meeting posted on the Georgia Poetry Society's YouTube. Okay, thank you so much, Marquise.
Indeed.